Hi, I'm Hannah.
And this is Emma, and we are going to cover chapters 33, Key Concepts, 33.1, Animal Nutrition, 33.2, How Food is Processed, and 33.5, which is a feedback circuit for nutrition. Animal nutrition is the process by which food is taken in, taken apart, and taken up.
So this is a lion. They're carnivores, which means they primarily dine on other animals. These zebras are an example of herbivores, which means they only dine on plants. They're also an example of opportunistic feeders, which means that while they're dining on plants, they may ingest insects or other animals outside of their standard diet. Omnivores like this peacock regularly consume plants and animals. Peacocks eat plants and insects, making them omnivores.
So now that we know the differences between carnivores, omnivores, and herbivores, let's talk about the individual phyla and which one is which. So the first phyla that we're going to talk about is the phylum Porifera. Porifera are our sponges. They are carnivores, and they eat organic matter and plankton. Our second phylum is the phylum Cnidaria. An example of these are our hydra. They are carnivores, as we saw in lab. Hydras eat plankton, crustaceans, and small fish. So our third phylum is the phylum Platyhelminthes. As we saw in lab, our Platyhelminthes are our planaria. They are carnivores, and they are also parasitic. Planaria eat protozoa bacteria, small worms, or dead organic matter. Like we saw in lab, they were eating a piece of liver. So our fourth phylum is the phylum Mollusca. As we saw in lab, an example of this is clams. They're herbivores and carnivores. They're an herbivore. This is a mollusk that is between two shells, like the clam. And they primarily dine on algae. If they're a carnivore, that is typically your squids and your octopus, and they feed on small fish. So our fifth phylum is the phylum Neomatoda. In lab, we saw roundworms. Overall, this phylum is kind of omnivore-ish. Some are parasitic, which feed on living organisms. Some are herbivores that feed on phytoplankton. And while some others are decomposers that feed on dead organic matter. So our sixth phylum is the phylum Annelida. As we saw in lab, these are our clamworms and earthworms. Majority of these are detrivores, which are kind of like your decomposers. They mostly feed on dead organic matter. So our seventh phylum is the phylum Arthropoda. As we looked in lab, we saw lobsters and grasshoppers. Lobsters are carnivorous, and then our grasshoppers are herbivores. Also included under this phylum, we have detrivorous feeders and parasites. So our eighth phylum is the phylum Ectodermata. These are our starfish. They are carnivores and scavengers. Starfish eat snails, clams, and mussels. Okay, so our ninth phylum is the phylum Chordata. Underneath Chordata is 7 major classes. The first class is our Admathas. These are our jawless fish. They are carnivores and parasites. They eat mostly marine worms and small fish. Our second class is the class Chondriathes. They are our jawed fish. Think sharks. They are obviously carnivores, and they eat small to medium fish. So our third class under the phylum Chordata is our class Osteichthyes. These are our bony fish. They have actual cartilage and bone. An example of an Osteichthyes is a lungfish. They can be carnivorous, herbivorous, or both. They eat plankton, snails, worms, or insects. The fourth class under phylum Chordata is the class Reptilia. They are carnivorous. Later in our video, you will see the python at the zoo. They typically eat mice, larger animals. So our fifth class under the phylum Chordata is our class Amphibia. Think salamanders and frogs. Most of the amphibians are carnivorous. They eat just about anything that goes in their mouth, which can be bugs, slugs, snails, other frogs, spiders, worms, mice, or even bats. There is one of these species underneath class Amphibia that are vegetarian. These are your Brazilian tree frogs. They eat fruits and berries. last two classes under the phylum Chordata are our class Aves and our class Mammalia. Two examples under our Aves, which are our birds, is our eagles, which are in the group birds of prey. They are carnivores. They eat fish and other small animals. And then our second example is our goose, like Gilbert, who lives at Hardin Simmons. He eats mostly grains and green vegetation. Our very last class is our class Mammalia. Three examples underneath Mammalia are humans, which are omnivores, lions, which are carnivores, and goats, which are herbivores.
Overall, an adequate diet must satisfy three nutritional needs: chemical energy for cellular processes, building blocks for large organic molecules, and essential nutrients. This adequate diet will allow the animal to produce ATP, and in turn, this powers an animal's ability to fly, see, and replicate cells. Organic carbon, such as sugar, and organic nitrogen, such as protein, are both required in balance to keep an animal healthy. Essential nutrients are substances that an animal requires but cannot assemble from simple organic molecules, including essential amino acids, the essential fatty acids, vitamins, and minerals. Their key function in cells includes serving as substrates, coenzymes, and cofactor in biosynthetic reactions.
Essential amino acids are found in an animal's diet to complete the full set of 20 amino acids needed to synthesize proteins. Essential fatty acids are used by animals to produce cellular components that include membrane phospholipids, signaling molecules, and storage fats. Essential fatty acids are only produced by plants, so an animal has to ingest them to complete their diet. Vitamins are an essential nutrient that are organic molecules that are required in an animal's diet in very small amounts. Essential nutrients, dietary minerals, are inorganic nutrients such as iron or sulfur that are needed by animals.
Malnutrition is the failure to obtain adequate nutrition. It affects 1/4 of the children worldwide and has negative effects on health and survival. Malnutrition is most common when drought, war, or other crises are present. There are two types. Deficiencies in essential nutrients is the insufficient intake of essential nutrients and can cause deformities, disease, or even death. It is important to stress good nutrition when you're young to prevent mental and physical deformities when you're older. The second type is undernourishment. First, the body uses up stored carbohydrates and fat. Second, the body begins breaking down its own proteins for fuel. Third, muscles begin to decrease in size. Fourth, the brain may become protein deficient and organ failure will begin to occur. Fifth, the animal will eventually die.
Protein-rich foods, including animal and plant-based proteins, can also vary enormously in their quality and their implications for our long-term health. Proteins are often said to act as building blocks for the lean tissues in our bodies, but they serve many other important functions in body regulation, supportive immune function, and a variety of other roles in our physiology. There are 20 types of amino acids needed to fulfill all of these functions, but only 9 of them are essential, meaning that our bodies can't make enough of them, so we rely on getting these from our food. In general, animal sources of protein like fish and eggs provide all of the essential amino acids in high enough concentrations that these foods are called complete protein sources. In contrast, plant-based protein sources like beans, lentils, nuts, and tofu tend to be incomplete sources of protein. It might seem that since plant-based proteins are incomplete in their nutrient content, that they're nutritionally inferior compared with animal-based proteins. But in fact, the health benefits of substituting plant-based proteins for animal-based ones, ideally a few days a week, this far outweighs the risk of falling short on essential amino acids. Plant-based proteins can be combined with other foods to provide a complete amino acid profile. In fact, many traditional food combinations like corn and black beans or rice and lentils are based on the principle of combining complementary proteins. Meals that contain vegetarian sources of protein also contain more fiber and less fat, especially saturated fat, than meals that feature animal-based protein. And even though saturated fat may not be as harmful as we once thought, it can still contribute to elevated levels of LDL cholesterol if we eat too much of it. So moderating our intake of red meat, for example, is still a sensible idea. In general, the typical Western diet contains more animal-based protein than we need to sustain good health.
People who eat lots of plant foods, eat a plant-based diet, tend to have much better health and better longevity than people who eat a heavy meat diet.
So if you're thinking of trying a low-carb, high-protein diet, it's important to pay attention to the kinds of proteins that are being consumed and in what quantities. A diet high in animal protein, especially if it's poor quality animal protein like processed meat or high-fat cuts of meat, this kind of diet can be harmful to our health, even if it leads to weight loss in the short term. Processed meats often contain nitrates used as a preservative, which can damage blood vessels and contribute to hardening of the arteries. These meats also tend to be very high in sodium, which can be a contributor to high blood pressure. The most sensible diets are usually those that encourage us to eat moderate amounts of high-quality protein foods. These should come from a variety of different sources, including some fish if possible, as well as plenty of vegetarian sources of protein that are combined for completeness.
So now you know what good nutrition is. Now let's talk about how food is processed. Food is processed in a 4-step fashion. First is indigestion, second, digestion, third, absorption, and fourth, elimination.
Food processing has 4 steps. The first is indigestion, the act of eating.
We can divide how animals feed into 4 main groups. The 4 groups are suspension feeders, substrate feeders, fluid feeders, and bulk feeders.
So flamingos are an example of a suspension feeder, which filter, capture, or trap their food particles from the surrounding medium.
Here we are in the birdhouse, where the main source of food is worms. Worms are a substrate feeder that live in or on their food source.
Ow! Those dang Texas mosquitoes! Mosquitoes are an example of a fluid feeder that suck nutrient-rich fluids from the living host.
The 4th group is bulk feeders. Humans, like pythons, eat bites of food in large chunks. And the 2nd step is digestion. The food is broken up into smaller molecules that the body can absorb. The 3rd step is absorption. It's when the animal's cells take in the broken down amino acids and sugars. The 4th step is elimination. It is when the undigested materials pass out of the digestive system.
There are 2 ways for animals to digest their food. First is by intracellular digestion. Cells use phagocytosis to intake large pieces of nutrients. And the second is extracellular digestion. The animals use compartments to digest their food. There are 2 examples of this. The first is a gastrovascular cavity. The second is an alimentary canal.
The gastrovascular cavity functions in digestion as well as in the distribution of nutrients throughout the body. The hydra uses its tentacles to stuff captured prey through its mouth into its gastrovascular cavity. Specialized gland cells of the hydra's gastrodermis, the tissue layer that lines the cavity, then secrete digestive enzymes that break the soft tissues of the prey into tiny pieces. Cells absorb the food particles, and the undigested food particles are released back out of the mouth.
An alimentary canal is found in animals that have a complex body plan. The alimentary canal has 2 openings. The first is the mouth, and the second is the anus. Such a tube is called a complete digestive tract. Because food moves along the alimentary canal in a single direction, the tube can be organized into special compartments that carry out digestive nutrient and absorption in a stepwise fashion. An animal with an alimentary canal can ingest food while earlier meals are still being digested, a feat that is likely to be difficult or insufficient for an animal with a gastrovascular cavity.
Okay, now let's talk about concept 33.5. Bioenergetics is the flow and transformation of energy in an animal that determines nutritional needs. For many animals, there are long gaps between meals. Under such circumstances, there is no need for their digestive system to be active continuously. Instead, processing is an activated sequence. As food reaches each new compartment, it triggers the secretion of digestive juices for the next stage of processing. In addition, muscular contractions begin that move the contents farther along the canal. This process allows animals to not use as much energy, therefore not needing to consume as much energy. Metabolic rate is the sum of all the energy in an animal used in a given time. There are two types. The basal metabolic rate, or BMR, is the minimum metabolic rate of a non-growing endotherm that is at rest, has an empty stomach, and is not experiencing stress. The standard metabolic rate, or SMR, is the metabolic rate of a fasting, non-stress ectotherm at a particular temperature.
So insulin and glucagon are two pancreatic hormones that maintain glucose homeostasis by tightly regulating the synthesis and breakdown of glycogen. The liver is a key action site for both of these hormones. Glucagon is made by alpha cells in the pancreas, and insulin is made by beta cells, also in the pancreas.
So now that you know what insulin and glucagon is, let's watch a video to summarize what diabetes is, what causes it, and how it works.
Diabetes can be scary, but don't panic. People with diabetes can live long, healthy lives. Sure, let's go over some basics. This is diabetes. Made simple. When we eat, food travels to the stomach. Food is made up of three basic nutrients: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. During digestion, carbohydrates are broken down into sugar, otherwise known as glucose. Here's a quick fact. Carbohydrates include foods such as bread, rice, pasta, potatoes, fruit, milk, and yogurt. In a normal digestive process, sugar travels from the stomach, through the bloodstream, to your body's muscle and fat cells. However, sugar can't enter these cells without the help of a special hormone called insulin, which is produced by the pancreas. Insulin acts like a key, unlocking the doors to the muscle and fat cells and allowing the sugar to enter. The cells then use this sugar as fuel to provide energy for the body. When this process is functioning properly, sugar entering the bloodstream from the stomach is able to exit the bloodstream at the muscle and fat cells. In this manner, the body is able to regulate the concentration of sugar in the bloodstream. Now let's see what happens in a person with diabetes. Sugar enters the bloodstream, but one of two things happens. Either the pancreas does not produce a sufficient quantity of insulin to match the sugar entering the bloodstream, or the body cells do not respond to the insulin that the body is producing. In both cases, the result is the same. Cell doors remain closed, causing sugar to get backed up in the bloodstream. As a result, blood sugar levels rise. This creates several problems. Because sugars are not able to enter your body's cells, your body is not getting the fuel it needs. As a result, you may feel tired or fatigued. Your body may try to dilute the excess sugar in the bloodstream by pulling fluid out of your cells. This can leave you feeling dehydrated and thirsty. Most importantly, over time, exposure to high blood sugar levels can cause damage to vital organs connected to the bloodstream, such as your eyes, kidneys, nerves, and heart. If not controlled properly, diabetes can lead to serious complications, such as blindness, amputation, kidney failure, heart attack, and stroke. In order to avoid these complications, people with diabetes must take steps to keep their blood sugar levels in a normal range. One way to do this is through diet. By reducing the amount of carbohydrates you eat in a single meal or snack, you can regulate the amount of sugar entering the bloodstream and prevent your body's insulin supply from becoming overwhelmed. This may mean limiting high-sugar foods such as cake, pie, candy, and soda. You know which ones. Another way to regulate blood sugar is through exercise. Physical activity makes your body's muscle and fat cells more receptive to insulin. In other words, those muscle and fat cells that wouldn't open before, now they will. Finally, your doctor may prescribe oral medications to increase your supply of insulin, regulate the amount of sugar entering the bloodstream, or make your body's cells more receptive to the insulin your body is producing. In some cases, insulin shots may also be necessary. Okay, let's review. We've talked about what diabetes is, a condition where either the body does not produce enough insulin, or the body's cells are not receptive to the insulin being produced. We've seen what complications can arise from it, such as fatigue, dehydration, and damage to vital organs. Finally, we've discussed ways to manage it through diet, exercise, and medication. For more information about your specific health diagnosis and treatment plan, please talk to your doctor.
So now that we've watched an overview video on what diabetes is, let's talk about diabetes mellitus. Diabetes mellitus is a disease caused by a deficiency of insulin or a decreased response of insulin in target cells. Now let's look at differences between type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So there are two types of diabetes. The first type is type 1 diabetes. It is an autoimmune disorder where the immune system destroys the insulin-producing beta cells in the pancreas. The treatment for type 1 diabetes is insulin injections, typically several times a day. Type 2 diabetes can be caused from hereditary genes, excess weight, or lack of exercise. So it's very different from type 1 diabetes. Type 2 is a non-insulin dependent diabetes. It is characterized by a failure of target cells to respond to normal insulin. Insulin is produced, so we have insulin in our body, but target cells fail to take up glucose from the blood, leaving blood glucose levels to remain elevated. This is characterized by high blood sugar. It can be very dangerous to people who have type 2 diabetes. Now, type 2 diabetes is also known to be the 7th most common cause of death in the United States. So if we're not healthy, it can be very, very detrimental.
This has been Hannah.
And Emma, and we've covered chapters 33, key concepts 33.1, 33.2, and 33.5.
We hope you enjoyed this video, learned something, and remember to eat healthy just like these giraffes.